Marking the anniversary of the modern gay rights movement in front of those now fighting for it, the president likened the struggle to past civil rights battles, then listed his administration's accomplishments towards achieving equality, with one exception: repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In our third story, 4 decades after the Stonewall riots, the president faces criticism that he is stonewalling. In the East Room, Mr. Obama telling members of the gay community and their families, "Welcome to your White House." Then addressing the elephant in the East Room, the 16-year-old policy banning gays from openly serving in the military.
I believe Don't Ask, Don't Tell doesn't contribute to our national security. In fact, I believe preventing patriotic Americans from serving their country weakens our national security.
And while Mr. Obama also pledged to work with the Pentagon and Congress to repeal the policy, the commander-in-chief gave no firm timeline. Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach, one of those discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, attended the ceremony last night and spoke with the president.
He looked me right in the eye and he said, "We're going to get this done." And then he continued to say, everyone seems to be on board. We've got about 75% of the public that supports this. He said, what we have is a generational issue, and so there's some convincing to do, that there's a generational gap, it seems, in some of the senior leadership.
Earlier tonight, a military board recommending that Lieutenant Dan Choi, an Iraq War veteran and Arabic linguist, be discharged from service. If that recommendation holds, Choi will become the 266th service member to fall victim to Don't Ask, Don't Tell since President Obama took office in January. Joining us now is activist Dan Savage, author of The Commitment, Love, Sex, Marriage, and My Family. Thanks for some of your time tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
Are there times like this where the president needs to be reminded he's also commander-in-chief of the military? Is there an argument to be made that he can't somehow use that authority to end this process?
There is an argument to be made, and last week 78 members of Congress made just that argument in a letter to the president encouraging him to use his authority as commander-in-chief to suspend enforcement of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and end the discharges of gay and lesbian service members like Choi and like Fehrenbach. He has that authority. You see over at the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano has used just that authority to suspend enforcement of something called the widow's penalty, or the widower's penalty, which is a law that requires people who've been married to a U.S. citizen for less than 2 years whose spouse dies to be deported. Napolitano wants that law changed. She thinks it's cruel and inhumane, and she suspended enforcement while Congress, quote-unquote, works on a fix. She seems to have authorities and powers that the president, her boss, the commander-in-chief, does not. It's really quite shocking that everyone in that room would applaud so politely when the president stood there and pretended like he couldn't end at least enforcement of Don't Ask, Don't Tell today, right now.
What Lieutenant Colonel Fehrenbach said after the conversation he had with the president last night was that the president told him there was this generational gap to deal with, but even the oldest man in the Army is not required to follow the orders of the President of the United States. It feels like, does it not feel like this to you, being directly involved in this, and to me as a sort of on the sidelines, that there's something that he's hinting at, that Obama is hinting at, that is just not getting through to anybody?
Well, he's the president. He doesn't have to blink out distress signals. He can issue orders. Yeah, there may be a generation gap. There was a much bigger and wider and more problematic generation gap when Truman ordered the military to integrate racially. If Truman had waited for everyone to be on board, the president himself said 75% of the country supports the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. How many more retrograde bigots do we need to wait to come up to speed before the president moves, at least on suspending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and then demanding that Congress repeal it?
Is there, he said generational, is there also a religious thing going on here? I mean, is Obama coming up against the organized fundamentalist proselytizers who look at the military and see these, fertile fields for indoctrination among the newer recruits, and, of course, indoctrination into the more of these restrictive religions? The components include homophobia.
Perhaps. Obama does seem to have a kind of a hang-up when it comes to wanting to find common ground with the likes of Rick Warren and fundamentalist Christians who are never going to see eye to eye with him on gay and lesbian issues. If he is our fierce advocate, if he is our champion, as he described himself last night at the White House, he needs to stop pandering to religious conservatives. Not all religious people oppose equal rights for gays and lesbians. Many religious organizations and people have endorsed marriage equality and endorsed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the president needs to worry more about those religious people and less about the Rick Warren and his ilk.
Was there any silver lining in this for you? Did you see anything that suggests there's progress within the administration?
Well, we once again got a reiteration of the promises the president made to the gay and lesbian community. We got them, though, now as president as opposed to as candidate Obama. And there was tremendous symbolic value to what happened at the White House yesterday. I don't want to discount that. However, there's been very little action, very little progress, and what comes out of the president's mouth doesn't seem to translate into policy. And we didn't, we got the promises when he was candidate Obama. What we want now is action. We want the fierce urgency of now. People are being discharged from the military now. People are being turned away from their partners' bedsides during medical emergencies now. We weren't sold the fierce urgency of maybe in my second term, or I'll get to it, or one day, or wait, have patience. We want these promises fulfilled now.
Yep. They're on two levels. A, human rights, and B, by the way, we need all the Arab linguists we can find. I don't care what they look like, what they do, who they are. The president is goddamned wrong on this. Dan Savage, author and activist. Great thanks for your time tonight.